Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? No, because comparison is the thief of joy. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick, and today we're going to discuss the phenomenon known as comparison as the thief of joy. Now, let me open by saying, comparison itself is not to blame. Why? Well, because we compare things all the time. We have no choice. We must compare things to understand things. For example, if we are to look at a dog and a cat, how do we learn the differences between the two? We simply compare them. When I look at a dog and I look at a cat, I can immediately notice some differences. The dog is friendly, affectionate, wonderful to be around. The cat is a raging asshole. Those are the two comparisons I would draw there. Cat lovers may unite against me, which I don't know if there's anybody in the audience for this podcast, which I recently learned does now include my father, which is fun. But I don't think that there's any cat lovers on this podcast. There may be cat tolerators, but not cat lovers. I am cat agnostic, meaning that I don't believe that cats exist. I don't know. I lost the metaphor there. Anyways, my point being, we learn things through comparison. The issue we have is when we start to use comparison as a way to try and understand other people's lives. Why? Well, because we can't you can compare a cat and a dog, right? Because you can have them sitting in front of you. You can have them sitting in front of you, or you can have a picture of them sitting in front of you, and you're comparing the physical, limited characteristics of the cat and the dog. I cannot tell you, by comparing the two against each other, which is going to make you happier, or even which creature is happier. I'm going to guarantee the happiness of the dog is much higher, simply because dogs seem to be deliriously happy all the time. A doctor once told me that they can give you puppy Xanax for puppy depression. I would struggle to find a dog that is suffering from depression. That's not in like an abusive situation, right? Those dogs I would believe are suffering from depression. But like most dogs generally seem very happy, and I've never heard one complain. So that's a terrible joke about the fact that dogs can't talk, because all jokes are funnier when you explain them. But comparison as the thief of joy refers to the phenomenon that human beings have to not only compare physical characteristics. For example, I'm tall, someone else is short. That's right off the bat. That's a comparison that you can make, and it does not thieve anyone's joy because it is simply true. I am stating a truism. But if you were to look at a picture of me smiling and laughing at Disney World, and a picture of somebody else working and not necessarily smiling, well, you look at those two pictures and you say to yourself, wow. Let me back up for a moment. When you look at those two pictures, the comparison, and the only comparison you should make, is that, wow, one of them is having fun at Disney World, one of them is at work, potentially not having as much fun. But what does that tell you? It merely tells you that at that moment in time, when I was at Disney World, I was having a good time. And when the fellow lady, whoever you're taking the picture of at work, was not at work, was not at Disney World, they were not having as good a time. That's the limit of the comparison. The problem is people extrapolate that single snapshot into entire lives, right? So let's stretch this to social media. Wow. That influencer XYZ with 30 million followers always seems to post pictures of themselves smiling and laughing at the beach. They have such a great life. I will never live a life that good. But they don't actually live that life, right? They take pictures involving a life that seems like that, but they don't actually live that life. They pose for pictures. They snap those photos out and then send them out into the world. That is their trade. Their trade is showing you how happy they are all the time. They're not actually happy all the time. I can guarantee you that. They pay taxes like everybody else. Or if they don't pay taxes, they should. IRS, get on that. What you have to be careful of, and people say this, I just don't like it when people say it on Instagram, so I'm going to say it here. What you have to be careful of is comparing somebody else's highlights or somebody else's manufactured highlights to your behind the scenes. What do we mean by that? Well, when you post a photo on social media or on Instagram, unless it's like a highlight of your behind the scene, right? Like unless it's like a blooper that you're showing to the world, you're putting your best foot forward. It's the video you've edited carefully. It's the picture after it's been retouched by the photographer. Or it's the picture of you in a moment of absolute pure bliss. Maybe something's funny happening. Maybe something funny is happening in it. Maybe there's a moment where you're kind of like ugly, but you're not like ugly. You're like cute ugly, and you want to show that off to the world. Or like you're at the gym and you're getting super buff and ripped and things like that. You're showing off your highlight to the world. But you don't take pictures of your behind the scenes. And everybody has that same behind the scene life that you do. Meaning that if you try to compare your everyday to the crap that people post on Instagram and social media, you're going to drive yourself insane. This gets particularly insidious, though, when you start to not only compare the lives you have, you start to compare the stuff you have, and you start to compare the people who are in your life to the people in somebody else's life. I just went silent as though that was some sort of like mega deep point. I'll unpack it a little bit for you. If you are you're living your life, and you go on Instagram, I guarantee you will find a guy who is better looking than your boyfriend, a girl who is better looking than your girlfriend. I don't care if you're dating Brad Pitt or if you're dating Blake Lively. That's how retouched professional pictures work. You can find somebody whose highlight is better than somebody's behind the scene because that's how highlights work. They are the highlight. They are the high point of something. Nobody takes the picture and shares it to everybody of themselves snotting milk out their nose. But they do take the picture where they're on the red carpet, or they're at the fancy dinner, or they've just gotten lip filler plastic surgery. That's another podcast that we'll do later on the whole plastic surgery thing, and I think it feeds out of this comparison issue. But look, it's very simple. You don't have to learn to be happy with the life you live, right? Like, I'm not saying, you just got to settle. No. There's a difference between finding peace in what you currently have, working for what you want, and not envying what somebody else has. Again, not to make you believe in the Bible, but the Bible goes on and on and on and on and on about envy in many, many places for this reason. Envy is rot to the soul. Envy is rot to the soul. And so if you when you run down that comparison road, you do nothing but rot yourself out from the inside. As opposed to rot yourself out from the outside, which would be rotting yourself inside. That's a backwards way of talking about that, but you get the point. The point being, in general, don't compare yourself. Or at least make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Make sure that if you're going to compare something, you're going to compare something like our picture from the beginning of the dog and the cat, and the comparisons are limited to just finding the differences. Anyways, maybe that was useful for you. It likely was not, and that's okay, because I did it anyway. I'm Nick. This was 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a nice day.